How about that football game last night? The Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals got to be the best 5-8 team that's like ever existed.
Who are you telling? It's wild because obviously I think one of the most high-powered offenses in the NFL. You know, their defense is definitely porous, but we talked about a couple weeks ago, they might have the defensive MVP and Trey Hendrickson. I'm not sure how he's done like the past couple of weeks, but he's still got to be up there in terms of quarterback sacks. So it's wild how they're not able to make a run this year. I mean, they're still in playoff contention, obviously, right?
Yeah,
or they officially
I don't know, man. At 5-8, it's the way the Broncos and the Chargers have played. I mean, I think Indy and Cincy are still in it technically, but I think it's far-fetched at this point. But their offense has been really good. That's what's weird, right? Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, they've really done their thing on offense. He's MVP caliber player this year, and they stink. And sometimes their defense has been good. And yesterday it was adequate enough. But weird team. Just a weird, I think that, how would you feel if you're in Cincinnati? Because I was actually driving through Cincinnati, went by Great American Ballpark, went by the stadium, and I'm like, I actually thought about this, and I didn't flip it on the radio. I probably should, but I was like, I wonder what they're talking about in sports talk radio here in Cincy, because I mean, you got your guy in Burrow. Your offense is really good. You got Jamar Chase. You got two of the better players in the National Football League. You've got a pretty good roster, but you're 5-8 or 4-8 at the time, but 5-8 now. What does that mean for your coach? Would they have a real issue at coach? Is this on him? Is this on their coordinator? Do you keep the coach, Zach Taylor, because of look what he's doing with Burrow and that offense is in sync? But is that more maddening? Like if Trevor was playing well and Doug was doing his thing and they were still 3-10 or 4-9 or something like that, is it more maddening in Cincy or here in Jacksonville?
It's a great point because you think, well, it's more maddening here, right? You've only won 3 games. You haven't really achieved expectations or anything. But then you look at Cincinnati and imagine having a quarterback playing at an MVP caliber level. Like football tells us, if you have that at your disposal, you're going to the playoffs. You're going to make a deep Super Bowl run. You have the MVP at quarterback? Why wouldn't you go to the playoffs? And they're not. So I almost think that it's more maddening for Cincinnati because at least in Jacksonville, we can see it. It's obviously the offense is stagnant. Okay, the defense isn't that good. There's at least reasons why. Now, whether or not you accept those reasons, that's on you. But at least we can look at it and say, this makes sense. It doesn't make sense to have a guy like Joe Burrow playing at such a high level and then not going to the playoffs probably this year.
Yeah, Hamby, what do you think about it, man? We're here in Jacksonville, obviously covering it, and that's what we do. And there's so many things to be mad at and angry at, and what the heck is going on at? I mean, I think Doug Peterson's a good coach. I don't know why it hasn't worked out this year. I don't know why they're 3-10. I don't know why their offense stinks. I'm not as much of a Press Taylor hater as everybody else is. Do I think Doug should be calling plays? Yeah. The Jags have good players. They really haven't. They've been hit by the injury bug a little bit, but not to the point where it should derail the season to this point. I mean, even T. Higgins up in Cincinnati has been out in and out of the lineup, and they still can score, right? So but Cincinnati, man, would be what a waste. We're talking here in Jacksonville, what a waste of Trevor's year, right? You get this extension, his 4th year, it feels like a waste. There's nothing to determine from it. Well, if you're Joe Burrow's got an MVP campaign that you just wasted in Cincinnati. You're not even going to make the playoffs, most likely. I almost feel like it is more maddening up there in Cincy.
No, I disagree. Look, I see what you're saying, but to me, the most maddening thing is unknowns and questions that can't be answered and frustrations of not knowing why everything is so bad. And with Cincinnati, you know exactly why you have the record that you have. Your defense is not good. Well, that's something that you think that you can immediately fix, at least in the offseason. It sucks for right now, but there's at least, hey, if we fix this, we will return to being good. We will be a playoff team because we have the pieces in place. It's working. There are a lot of things that are working. In Jacksonville, nothing is working. There's not one thing that you can say, hey, at least we have this. At least we bank on this, depend on this. At least we'll have this next season, and we know this will be good. We just have to fix this. In Jacksonville, you have to fix everything. The offense hasn't worked. The running game hasn't worked. Trevor Lawrence has been out. The defense hasn't worked. The coaching doesn't seem to be there. The culture doesn't seem to be there. You name it. So although, yes, there's wasting talent there, there's just as much talent wasted here. It's just not one player or two players with Burrow and Chase. We have good players too. We might not have MVPs, but we have a lot better players on defense than they do, and nothing's worked.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's a fair point. And that's why I think it's also a fair question. Because what I would say to your point, Hamby, is all right, here in Jacksonville, the easy thing is to say, all right, it's time to reset. Because you do have all these pieces, let's figure it out. But I also would say to you, what you just said there, and what I've kind of said in the last few weeks, and I think this has been the problem for Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke specifically, but even everyone here that follows the Jags, is what do you hang your hat on? Like, what in Jacksonville are you hanging your hat on? So, but I think in Cincinnati, you've got Austen, the problem of, okay, you hang your hat on that offense. Yeah, like Hamby said, you can change the defense. But the big question is, do you change Zach Taylor, right? When you have this disappointing of the year, it does start at the top. Like, you've got to assess the top. But that guy also has built a pretty good offense in Joe Burrow. So I think here it's at least easier to be like, all right, let's fix it with a reset. There, I think it's a more muddy in Cincinnati about what you can do, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
What fan base is more distraught, disappointed? Because, and obviously we have the teal colored glasses on, so I can't remember, but like I feel like expectations this year for Cincinnati was at least like an AFC championship, was it not? I mean, I know they play in a very hard division, but like you had Baltimore. I don't think anybody predicted Pittsburgh was going to be what they are. And keep in mind too, like I get that Cincinnati's defense isn't playing well. Well, neither is Baltimore's. But Baltimore is, going to probably make a playoff run here. I mean, there's a couple. Look at the Bills defense against the Rams. Like, there's a couple of the top teams right now that aren't playing good defense that are considered some of the best teams in the NFL. And unfortunately, Cincinnati is not one of them right now. So it's definitely a great conversation of which fan base is more distraught. But I think if I'm looking at, the Bengals and what you want to do going forward, yeah, I get Taylor could be on the hot seat a little bit. But at the end of the day, your identity is the offense. The offense isn't really letting you down. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a change of defensive coordinator.
Yeah, well, they could do, and here's the thing. It worked, and this is, it worked in Philadelphia. Let's just say that. Nick Sirianni changed the coordinators, and look what they're doing. Now, they still got to finish it off, because this is the last year they melted down. And whoa, how about the A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts stuff? We'll get into that maybe a little bit later. But still, they made adjustments. They said, hey, we're going to keep Sirianni. They obviously love their GM. Roseman's been very good. And that worked. I didn't think that I think once you start doing that, it feels like it's going to start, it's just trying to save it for another year, and you're probably going to fizzle out. Not the case in Philadelphia. So maybe Cincinnati can do the same thing. I want to get to Joe Burrow's outfit before, especially for Delphonic, because I see he's in the chat. And I know he's been calling for that. And I know his work schedule kind of changes. Okay, we'll get to Joe Burrow now. And then maybe what I do want to ask, though, and keep this in mind as we come out of the fashion part of the show, is what can the Jags hang their hat on right now for if you go to Shad Khan, if you're Trent, if you're Doug, if you're a new coach, a new GM coming in here, what do you sit here and be like, all right, we got this, Shad, right? And what do you do and say about that? Because I do think that's a little bit of an issue right now outside of, I think, two good edge rushers and Brian Thomas Jr., it gets muddier after that. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, what the hell was this, Austen Lane?
Game just because anybody with concussion may have said, hey, you know what? Let me go and wear a suit and a turtleneck that matches my exact skin tone, and let's see how that works out. Now, going to the whole Joe Burrow thing. Yeah, it's an aggressive choice, Brent, right? That this is what you say in the fashion world. It's an aggressive choice. But, Hamby, do you have the numbers in front of you, what Joe Burrow did last night?
No, but I know that I had him in fantasy and that I was down about 6 points going into the last drive. And Jamar Chase also, thank you for not going down and being a smart football player at the end of the game and punching that football in for a 40-yard tud to give me the win and send me to the playoffs. I was in 9th all year, and I finished in the playoffs in 4th, so thank you for that. But I believe it was 350, 3 tuds and a pick for Burrow.
Okay, so if that's the case, Brent, then I think Campy's going to agree with me here. We're going to give Joe Burrow a 10 out of 10, our highest grade that we can give Joe Burrow here on that outfit. I like it, man. He has the confidence wearing shades inside. You know why? Because the sun never sets on a badass. And once again, Brent, we saw a badass last night.
I don't know what this looks like to me. I mean, I saw some comps. To me, I used to play. I had this video game set called like Odyssey. And it was before like even ColecoVision and other things like that. And like Sega Genesis. What was that? Was it Sega? Was that what that was? Was that the other?
Yes, Brent, that was Sega Genesis. Yeah. Never gamed his entire life, but there you go.
No, for a second there, when I was saying it out loud, I was like, is that a game or is that the game system? All right. Yeah, it was a game system. But I had Odyssey. And like, this reminds me of a game that I would play in Odyssey. Like, that's how good the graphics were right there for Joe Burrow. Like,
look at he looks like a walking light bright, and that's fine because the future is going to be bright for him, Brent. He shines, he gets all the attention. 10 out of 10 once again. My highest marks.
You guys, I have a problem with you and Casey. Hamby, you don't know this going way back, but like Casey and Austin for years when we're doing the show on the radio side, they like love Burrow. They love everything Burrow wears. They're fine with Burrow. Like this dude, like this is not fashion. This is stupidity. Like this is. I don't know why anybody can get on board with this. I don't care if he plays good football or not. It's idiocy. It's like it's when the guys started wearing shorts as part of their suits. Like that doesn't look good. LeBron played and Harden were good basketball players. It doesn't look good.
Hamby, I'll let you go first, and then I have to get my rebuttal because I'm not going to let Brent badmouth me about Joe Burrow. But please go ahead, Hamby.
Delphonic says somebody said it looks like 90s movie theater carpet.
Saw that. That's pretty accurate.
Let me pull it back up real quick. Yeah, this is horridly bad.
You guys are out here.
This is absolutely ridiculous. He looks like he's wearing clown boots that are just all black. Yeah, highlighters and mixed colors and.
You just won you a fantasy football championship. That's how you're going to treat him.
What do his teammates say? Like, I didn't see any sound in the locker room after. Like, what do his teammates say about this stuff? Like, this
not a dang thing, Brett, because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and they say, "Thank you, Joe. Please wear something cool again."
Put this on the cover of Madden.
Can you imagine Bill Belichick was coaching like the Bengals, and he walks in on the plane like this?
Yeah, Bill's like, "Hey, you ready to go to another Super Bowl, Joe? You got it, Mr. Bill. Okay, cool." Like,
Mr. Bill.
I don't know what you guys want from this dude. I mean, first of all, did you hear last night? Bought a Batmobile.
I did see that.
He's got that going for him. $3 million, not even street legal, not worried about it. Brent, you have to understand, this is what fashion is, right? Like, when you're at the top of your game, whether you're a celebrity or something, you get away with this, right? Like, if you took something so, like, out of the blue and, like, something so, like, fresh you've never seen before, and you put it on a homeless person, you're probably going to say, yeah, that person looks crazy. But then you put it on, like, I don't know, give me a big celebrity.
Joe Burrow.
Okay, put it on Joe Burrow, and it's like, all right, dude can rock it. Because you know why, Brent? He has the skills and the confidence to back it up. And that's what it's all about. You can't throw 2 interceptions against the Tennessee Titans and then wear a turtleneck that matches your skin tone. You just can't do it, Mac Jones. But what you can do is essentially glue a light bright to your track jacket and your track pants and then wear shades inside, win Hamby a fantasy football championship, and then look like a pretty cool dude. And that's what Joe Burrow is, right? He's pretty cool.
Between on whether this thing costs like $12,000 or if
12.
If his nieces built it for him.
I hope it was 20 grand. I hope it was 20 grand. I hope he only wore it once.
Man, I'm telling you, it's but you're not a big fan of like Cam Newton's hats, right? So why aren't we Nobody likes Cam Newton's hats. Everybody kills him.
I kind of rock with Cam Newton's hats. I wish I could wear something like his.
Hamby, you've lost all credibility if you're going to hit on Joe Burrow, but then you're going to give Cam Newton props for his hats. Here's my issue with Cam Newton. Like, it's one thing if you're like a player. Okay, I get it. You're trying to, be like Russell Westbrook. And when Cam Newton was a player, yeah, dude backed it up. He was Superman. I get all that. But when you're retired and you go into the professional workplace setting, you can't look like the Monopoly man. Okay, you simply cannot do it. You can't have the monocle. You can't have the top hat. Normal it down a little bit because Cam Newton, you're 6'6" or whatever. Like, you already stick out. But that's why I don't wear anything fancy because I'm like, well, I got my beard, I got my dreads, I got my height, I got my size. Do I really need to wear a giant top hat to make me stick out even more? No, I'm all set.
What do I have?
A great smile, Brent. A great smile and a real stick-to-itiveness attitude to get the job done.
Hey, I'm not going to lie. Delphonic one time put me in the Kelsey outfit, and I thought I looked pretty damn good.
Oh, wow.
Well, Brett, you had the whole Miami Vice outfit that one time? You looked pretty good.
Yeah, I did have the Miami Vice outfit. That's right. That was Hick and I had that. We went to UNF for that. Yeah, that event.
Brett, we do a new thing because it was supposed to be this year's. It just feels different with the Jaguars, and yeah, it felt different through therapy when I had to go a couple times to talk about it. But can we do a new thing next year where hopefully it's different again, maybe a new regime, and you just go off the beaten path? You maybe go more Joe Burrow route. You become Hollywood Brett Martineau.
Yeah, I don't know if I can sign up for that, guys. I'm not.
Come on, man.
Listen, Marcel Robinson once in a while he'll go to the nines, when we go to the plane and stuff. I'm more of the blended guy, right? I don't want to be standing out. I don't want people talking about what I'm wearing on the plane and other things. On TV, that's one deal. But on
Austin.
I'm not wearing that to the press conference. Hey, if I start asking Doug questions and I'm wearing this, you're right. My confidence has reached a whole new level.
Okay, well, I assume in this picture, right after this picture was taken, he probably threw for 4 touchdowns. So, yeah, once again, 10 out of 10 marks there, Hamby. My highest recommendation right there. Looks great.
I'm not even going to get into what the comments were on this one. But
don't have
to. How many do I have to do here?
That one actually.
Okay,
I can respect that one more than probably the others I've seen so far.
Bruh.
Went 22 for 24 and 3 touchdowns and 0 picks. Yeah, once again, my highest marks, 10 out of 10.
He throws 3 picks in a game. He's wearing a T-shirt the next day.
Joe Burrow doesn't throw 3 picks anytime. What are you talking about? 3 picks in a game, bro?
All right, 2 more. Duval Jack says, Brent, how do those meetings normally go? Do they meet with Shad together or separately? Talking about Balky, Doug, and Shad.
That's a good question. And I'm not sure if they're referring to at the end of the season or
that's what it sounds like
week to week, but I think it sounded like more end of the season. I'm gonna. This is a pure guess, and maybe I should know this, and maybe I just don't recall it. But it's a great question, and now one that maybe I want to go find out a little bit about. So I appreciate it. I think, or maybe I hope, it would be more together and separate. You know what I mean, Hamby? I'm not looking for anybody to rat each other out, but I also wouldn't mind. I don't even know if I'm shot which order I put that in. I want to see if they're aligned, right? If there's still alignment here, if they're on the same page, how they feel about one another, who's going to come in and throw the other guy under the bus, and then come meet with us, when we get all together and be like, "Oh, I love you." You know what I mean? So I would probably, because I think that's a real issue now. Shad might not. I just think that's an issue in NFL buildings. I don't think that's necessarily the issue here. In fact, I think that's been a little bit better than probably most NFL buildings would be. The pointing of the fingers during this kind of year, I think they've done a better job of staying together. Is there some of that? Probably is my guess. I think there is, but maybe not to the degree that it's so toxic and over dramatic as you see sometimes in other buildings when this stuff goes on in the major disappointment. So if I was Shad, I would probably say, hey, Trent, we're going to have a meeting at the end of the year. Hey, Doug, have a meeting at the end of the year. I want to see how those goes. By the way, it's not a 15-minute meeting. I think that's a pretty long meeting. And then I'd like them both to be together.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of things that I'm doing here, and this is going to lead into where we're going with it. It's like, okay, what went wrong, right? Why did you guys say this? Like, you thought this was the best team ever assembled. Where did we fail? What part of the plan failed? Because I've made the case it failed way back in February, March. And what can you hang your hat on to show that it's going to be fixed, even if you guys aren't the ones fixing it? I'm trying to get educated a little bit from Peterson and Balky.
Mm-hmm.
If I make the move to who I'm going to hire. Now, as I'm saying all this out loud, it doesn't feel like there are often end of the year meetings the way I just described, and then, hey, you're fired. It usually is, hey, you're fired.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because they meet every week. Like, after every game, Schott is in the locker room talking to Doug and Trent. Like, that happens every week. Then they're on the phone at least once a week, I would say. And sometimes if Schott's in town, probably more. So the communication is definitely there in what's going on. So Schott's probably gauging a lot of his intel from those conversations too. But given the question, I think it would be a fascinating process the final week of the year before you even coach the last game for Schott to have these big meetings with both big players in terms of Doug Peterson, Trent Baalke, then have one together and see where they're at. Because all you have to do is go back to what I believe in, what's wrong here in Jacksonville. Some of it's alignment, some of it's transparency, some of it was the plan. And then how do you fix it no matter who's in place? So it's a really good question. And I'm now going to go start peeking into that a little bit more and see how they normally do these. I don't think they're true exit meetings because, again, if someone's getting fired, they usually just say, see you later. Like, right. It's a bring your playbook and goodbye. Like, it's not a long conversation. I think Mike Belarkey kind of shed a little light on that for us a couple of weeks ago. What else you got?
And then the last one I'll bring up, Hamby's Burner, which, as a reminder for all those listening and watching, I have no relation to. Says, did anyone notice Tony Khan on Monday Night Football last night hanging out with the Costco guy and the Big Justice kid? And then pretty much went on to say, does Tony care anything but about AEW?
All right. Here's the deal. I did see that. You guys were commenting about that. I think Austin would be better to help. So save that one, and we'll get Austin in on that because I think he's got some thoughts as well. I know what's going on there a little bit. I've seen what you guys are talking. I know AEW is in Dallas this week, right? So that was part of the reason they were at the Cowboys game because I was just talking to Tony Khan on Sunday in Nashville. But I think you had some strong feelings about that also. Austin, I think, probably will too. So we'll get to that. So let's go back to what I was saying on the conversation of what do you have to hang your hat on? And Hamby, I mean, if you're I think you kind of brought this up a little bit for me. I think the Jags have good players on their roster. Do they have enough of them? No. Do they have the right direction, the leadership? As of right now, I say no. I thought they did. I don't think that's the case right now. Is it deeper than that? Yes, I fully believe it. Because as we were talking about the draft picks yesterday, you can go now back to Trevor Lawrence. That was not a bad pick. Best quarterback in the class. Everybody still – there are 25 teams that would sign up for Trevor Lawrence tomorrow if they had a quarterback problem. Tomorrow, they would sign up for him. Trayvon Walker just continues to ascend. Really good football player. And he's going to be even better. He looks like he's just getting better. Then you draft Brian Thomas Jr. this year, and look what he's doing. And again, I'll give credit to somebody on Twitter brought this up the other day. Brian Thomas Jr. is doing what he's doing. I just looked at stats. He's the second most prolific pass catcher of the rookie class behind Bowers, who's really a tight end, not a receiver. He's ahead of the Adunzes. He's by a lot, by Harrison Jr. by a lot. And then right there is Malik Neighbors, who got fed the ball a lot more than him, quite frankly, through a stretch of the season. So even with all that, you're 3-10. You're 3-10. So what does that say? It tells me, Hamby, that there are deeper issues than just talent pool, which might be a feather in the cap of a guy like Trent Baalke. But yeah, they need more guys. They need more guys like Jarian Jones, we've said this week. They need more guys like Brian Thomas Jr. They need alphas. They need, though, also to get better play and more consistent play out of the guys that they do have, because they're pretty good. Like, you can win more than 3 games. You can go to the playoffs. You can maybe even make a run with the quality of player you have on this team for the most part, if it's elevated by coaching, scheme, and culture, I think, in the building. So this is a deeper than just, hey, we got Brian Thomas Jr., but that is certainly where you start probably hanging your hat, right? You got Brian Thomas Jr. and you got 2 pass rushers, and not many people around the National Football League have 2 guys like Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. They might have 1, but they don't have 2.
Yeah. Oh, here's what this boils down to me from everything that you said, and I agree with everything. To me, it's this simple. If you're Doug, all the things that you would go in and say to hang your hat on are reasons that you should probably be out of a job.
Yeah.
And so it's almost not beneficial for Doug to play up these guys because they are good. A lot of coaches would do a lot to have the talent that is on this Jaguars roster, right? So for Doug to talk about all of how good the players are and how he could hang his hat on a lot of them would not be beneficial at all unless he's got some real good excuses to pair up with those things. Now, I'm not saying that our roster construction as a whole is great, because I'm not saying Balky gets a pass either. But as far as guys that should be able to win you football games, you have those guys. Like we've talked about a lot in the last 2 weeks, from a conversation that went all the way back to one that Austin, Casey, and I had. There are a lot of pillars on this football team. A lot more than any other team in your division right now, and probably more than half of the league as far as guys that you know are staples on your roster for multiple years, right? We don't have any on the offensive line. We've talked about that. There are position groups that are questionable. That's to say the least. However, individual guys, you got a lot of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily agree totally. Like, I think Houston could really have a good argument here. I even think Indianapolis has a good amount of players that are pretty good, like pillars, right? Those cornerstone kind of guys. But who knows about the quarterback? But, who knows about C.J. Stroud right now? Is he as good as everybody thought? Who knows about Trevor Lawrence? Because we've got all this stuff and not enough consistency. So, in fact, a lot of the teams in the AFC South are in the same boat. I think Tennessee's a little different right now. They just don't feel as talented to me on paper as a lot of these other teams in the South. And the Jags, I mean, you can argue the Jags have the most. I mean, you certainly can. So we did this a little bit yesterday. It's like, okay, if you put defensive tackle right now on the Jags, like an elite one that's really good, you pick your favorite one across the league, or you pick your 3rd favorite one across the league. How much better are they as a football team? That's better against the run. That means they're passing better, pass rushing better with the guys on the edge. But that doesn't make up for your offense. I mean, if you're still not in the lead in games, you're only going to do so much with your pass rush and your defensive front. So I think it's a little chicken egg there. But the bottom line is, it also shows you it's both. You still need to do better on defense schematically. We've seen good and bad this year from Nielsen. We've seen some guys elevate their play, but not everybody elevate their play. And even that's been inconsistent. And then we also just feel like there's not enough talent at certain positions. I think safety, we knew was a little light going into the year. I thought Cisco would be so much better than he has been, but it's not a good enough position on your roster right now. And then defensive tackle, they continue to swing and miss. You hope some of these young guys will emerge, but you haven't been able to fill that. Even Devon Hamilton, who's a nice player and probably does his job more often than not, is not a dynamic player for you as a highly paid guy. So you have got to figure out that interior. And same goes for your offensive line. Same goes for your running back room. You've got to figure these things out. The problem we have in Jacksonville is they've kind of felt like they've got it figured out. So what moves are they going to make? It was like we had to talk the Jags into replacing Luke Fortner on the offensive line. And the noise got so big that they went and signed Mitch Morse. And maybe they would have anyway. But it did kind of feel like the noise got so loud that they signed Mitch Morse. Well, guess what? You're only replacing Brandon Sheriff next year at your line. You're already pot committed. You just committed to Walker Little. You're committed to Anton Harrison. You're committed to actually Morse for another year, but that one could change. You're committed to Ezra Cleveland. And now you got to go find a right guard. So if that's where you think you need to elevate your position, you basically just said we're all good when you signed Walker Little. Because to be honest with you, I'm not sure how much a right guard is going to elevate anything. And Sheriff's been pretty good this year. He's arguably having his best year with the Jags here this season. And we thought he may be washed. So a credit to him. Obviously, Trevor's going to play more consistent. Is that more scheme? A lot of people think so. Is that some injury? Absolutely. What about the backs? You got two guys that I think a lot of people around the league would take. But can you do better? I don't know. Tight end? I don't know if you can do much better than what you're getting at tight end. I mean, I think Brent Strange's pretty good. I think Evan Ingram's good. I think receiver right now on your roster, you've got some good players, but you need more. Gabe Davis, is that a bust play? Do you need to move on from that? Can you move on from that? Are you going to elevate? Are you going to take a first-round receiver? No. Are you going to go get another free agent? Probably not.
Seen people talking about T-Mac.
Yeah, a lot of people are. Yeah. So my point is, like, this goes back to the original question. What are you hanging your hat on? What are you saying? We're good at this. And right now you're good at Brian Thomas Jr.
Yep.
And you're good at pass rush. Yeah. Guys, you're not changing that. You would not trade any of the guys that you have for someone in the draft, right? I mean, you might trade them for an elite player, but Jamar Chase. But that's it. So, honestly, that's all I would say. Your cornerback room isn't all set. Your safety room isn't all set.
Your quarterback is set. I mean, I know it's a big question mark, but if you're talking about like if you would make a move or if there's even an opportunity or 5% chance that you can make a move, there's 0. So
did you just hear that cough, by the way, or was I able to mute that?
You didn't do a great job. You did an okay job.
Sorry.
It wasn't as good as when I sneezed about 5 minutes ago and I got the mute button in time.
You got the mute button. That's good.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little bit of everything going on. So hang with me on that stuff. But yeah, I think that's the problem. The problem is how you're pot committed to so much of this already that you might not know is good. And maybe that might be the biggest reason why you need change in the coaching staff is because this didn't work. Like the schematics of this, the growth of this, the development of this, while it's worked in some instances, hasn't worked enough to the tune. And again, you go back to culture and it's like that, then that might be the problem. Doug has plenty of examples of Jarian Jones or Brenton Strange or Tank Bigsby or whatever. And Anton Harrison, those guys coming along, showing signs. Great. Bulky has plenty of examples. Brian Thomas Jr.,
Anton,
some of the picks, I don't know about the extensions this year. I think he's not going to hang his hat on that, but even the Bigsbys of the world, right? These guys that have been developed, like these picks are looking better. That's fine. So you have some good, some bad. That's the nature of the position anyway. You're not always going to have everybody, all 53 is going to be great. And whether you drafted them, signed them, or coached them. So it speaks to a bigger thing, and that's culture, Hamby. Like, that's probably why they need a reset, is because I don't know how you fix that with people that are already in place.
It seems like I don't want to belabor the point, but again, if you can't figure out the why, if you have players that are, if a couple players are underperforming, it's one thing, and you blame the players. If everybody's underperforming and the team is underperforming, you got to point to something a little bit deeper than just individual efforts, right? Because we've seen these guys play well. It's not like these guys don't show flashes. They've all shown flashes, right? So, but if everybody is across the board is pretty much having a down year and you're 3-10, then a move has to be made, in my opinion.
Yeah. Duval Jag says, he brings up a good point. We're always guilty of this a little bit, right? The players are good because you're familiar with the names. The record doesn't lie. You are what you are. Yeah, I would agree with some of that, not all of that. Again, I I would sit here and ask you this question. If Dan Campbell was coaching this football team this year, because Dan Campbell, everybody loves him. If Dan Campbell was coaching this football team, what would their record be? And or if this, it's a better thing, because this sounds like a shot at Doug, and I'm not really trying to do that. I think Doug's worked before. Doug's been a good coach before. He's got a Super Bowl trophy. He's not a bad coach. It's not working this year. But let me do this instead. Let me give you the Jacksonville roster in Detroit. Right now, everything in Detroit, the building, the GM, the front office, the coaching staff, the everything for this season. Now, are they as good as Detroit? Have they won 11 in a row? I would say no. I don't think so. But they're way better than 3-10.
Mm-hmm.
They are way better than 3-10. And that's the point of the player part. Like, it's not as bad. They're not 3-10. It's not a 3-10 roster. It's just not a 3-10 roster. It's a 3-10 culture. It's a 3-10 scheme. It's a 3-10 staff and building and everything else. That's what it is this year. And again, that's not to take the onus off the players. The players have their own faults in all of this. But you put this in LA with the Chargers, LA with McVay. You put this in Detroit, this roster there. You put it in Baltimore. I just don't think it's 3-10. And I also don't, that's not to say I think it's 6-7. Like, I think it's like a 8-5, 9-4 kind of football team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what, and maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's where I would disagree with the Duval Jags. Do we hype some of the players up around here because relative to what we've seen in the past? Absolutely. I'm guilty of that. I mean, this is a better roster than like 9 out of 10 rosters that we've seen in Jacksonville in the last 15 to 20 years. Absolutely. Does that mean it's the best across the league? No. That's a little bit of the problem with the offensive line. Do I like the offensive line better than some? Yeah. But it's not Detroit's offensive line, right? It's not Philadelphia's offensive line. The Jags have a problem in that respect. They haven't built it to that degree. But it's also just not the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers are a great example here. I mean, the Panthers are getting a lot out of that football team right now. That's really just okay. Why is that? Why can't Doug and company get more out of this football team? And I think he's thrown his hands up too. I think he's trying like hell, and it's just not working. But you can't just sit there and also say, hey, next year it will work. We won't get hurt, or we'll win the close games, or we'll. You got to go deeper than that. And right now, I think it's a deeper-rooted problem in Jacksonville. And I'm not even telling you that like Doug Peterson created it. Maybe Trent Baalke did have a hand in it. But again, we do have to give those guys credit for pulling it out of the urban stuff. And now we might have to hand it off to somebody to make it go from mediocre to championship. You know, we had Malarkey on a few weeks ago. This is what Tennessee thought they were doing. Tennessee, when they fired Malarkey that year, even though he'd gone to the playoffs and he had flipped around, they're like, yeah, you know, that's awesome. Hats off to Mike. We just don't think he can get us to the promised land. So we're going to bring in a guy like Mike Vrabel. We think he can. Well, Mike Vrabel did actually do a good job there, as we know. And he got him, I believe, with Derrick Henry to the AFC Championship game one of the years, and that was as close as they got. But is that the kind of question we're asking here in Jacksonville? It's like, okay, you guys don't stink. You guys have done some good things here. But we need somebody else to take it from here to here. And that does happen in sports. It's the question I ask all the time in college football about these coaches. It's like, okay, you look like you're going to be pretty good. How about Mike Norvell? Mike Norvell built it, developed it, Jordan Travis, transfer portal, all these different things. Did a good job. Now, the next level of that, there are two. Sustain it and win big. Well, he can't even get to win big part because he hasn't sustained it. Now that's his next hurdle. Can he sustain it? Can he get it back? Can he flip it quick? The thing you asked about Kirby Smart for a couple of years was, okay, he's sustaining it. He's building it. Can he win big? Well, he couldn't at first. He was right there on the doorstep. And then he did. He won big. So that answers the question. I think that was why they got Kirby Smart. Was it because Mark Richt was bad? No. Is that they thought Mark Richt was never going to get him there. And that's why they changed him. So this sounds like such a negative thing sometimes. Sometimes you get guys to a certain plateau and you need to hand it off. I think that's in every business. I think that's a lot in sports. We see it. And I think that's really become my big question mark with Doug as a coach, because in Philadelphia, he got to the mountaintop. Now, he did do that. But the one thing you could say is he didn't sustain it. So his kind of worked in a weird way. They got to the mountaintop. They really peaked. But they couldn't keep going. I mean, they got back to the playoffs, but that was about it. Now Doug is showing you, hey, we can get you to the playoffs here in Jacksonville, which is like the mountaintop, by the way, to get to the playoffs in Jacksonville. But how do we sustain it? Well, Doug has not proved in his head coaching career that he can sustain it. So that's maybe why you have to flip it. The other thing is, can he elevate Trevor Lawrence to a certain height? And he's not proven that. And again, I know this is sounds like all Doug, or Trent. There's some onus on players here too. Like you know that's part of the equation. But you're not changing the whole roster out. I think they just went through